Good morning and welcome back to Business AM. Good. So the question is, what headlines are you waking up to this morning? Other than the fact, for you who don't know about sport in the country, that we have now a team in basketball that is called the Morans that are representing the country in an African final. The equivalent of the Africa Cup of Nations that your team, Harambee Stars, failed to represent you properly. Good. This morning, your CS, that is acting CS, is already in office this morning. And we're going to listen to exactly what he said and then talk about it. Good. Just hold it there. But I just want us to start this morning with Manore and talk about exactly what new thing you ought to know this morning. So now, your governor, just the other day, and your senator, they were fighting to get you 335 billion shillings to your county in the 2019-2020 budget. As things stand, they are really facing a lot of challenges. They might not actually be able to get that now. As it turns out, things are headed to the 316 billion shillings that was officially offered. This morning, I'm going to ask, is it a lost battle?
I think in the spirit of devolution and ensuring that we get maximum resources in the counties, it is a lost battle because looks like the Council of Governors and the Senate are not reading from the same page.
Yes.
Because we could have expected them to be having a common fight.
Yes.
Because the role of the Senate is actually to protect devolution.
Yes. And
by them going ahead and discussing the revenue allocation bill, which of course again now has clearly shown that it's 316 billion that is going to the counties. And if you saw in yesterday's newspaper, there was a whole page pullout from the National Assembly trying to actually explain the basis of the 316 billion.
Yes.
The governors are a bit close. But what I like about it, and I'm very proud about the governors, is that they've come out strongly to fight for devolution. Because we want as much resources as possible to go to the counties. Because if you look at a budget of 3 trillion, and we're only taking 316 billion to the counties,
yes,
that's almost probably around 10% of what we have as the national cake.
Yes.
And when you now go down to what we collected, because in 2018, 2019, we collected around 1.5 trillion shillings. It's still not, it's probably around 17 or so percent.
Yes.
So we have to do a lot in ensuring that maximum resources are going to the counties. Remember, the counties have roles that they play, and those are entrenched in the Constitution. So if we don't see increases in the budgetary allocation,
yes,
we'll always see dilapidated hospitals and no improvement in such facilities. So, because that is the work of the counties.
So even as we talk about this contentious motion now about not getting the 335, the Controller of Budget actually does come and say, look, I don't like the way most of this money is spent. And of course, because he's entrusted with the role, that office is entrusted with the role of being advisory and being the watchdog of the way it is that the county governments and national governments spend their money, he says there seems to be a priority conflict here, because the way in which these counties are allocating their money in the budget, then that's what says now. Stop now remitting all these funds to them, because at the end of the day, we still have a misallocation of funds from the county governments. Do they have a point there for me to give them the 335?
What I can tell you, Simba, is that how budgets are drafted in both the national government and county governments, you cannot reallocate funds from one vote head to another without the approval of the county assembly. So this issue of more money being used for travel and allowances as opposed to development is an issue that actually has to be taken back to Treasury. It is how the national government has been treating the counties and how the monies have been released. So if I owe you 100 shillings and I give you your full 100 shillings, you can be able to allocate it the way you want and how you intended to spend. But if I owe you 100 shillings and I opt to give you 10 shillings every month, you may end up actually using the money on priority areas according to you, and other areas are actually left out. So that is what the county governments have gone through for the past 1 year or two. There has been a cash crunch in the national government, so counties have been reduced to making requests every month. And most of these requests are actually requests for recurrent expenditure. So then you find that the national government is only willing to send money to the counties in the last month or the last few weeks to the end of the financial year, and the governors can't do anything.
Yes.
Those are the challenges. And the governors have come out and spoke about it. Yes.
Now, it looks headed that the bill that will be tabled at the Senate committee before it's submitted to the president is in line with a Supreme Court advisory of 2014 that says you can proceed with the 310. Good. But as it stands right now, it's 316 that we're looking forward for the counties getting. And we don't know that there's a case already in the Supreme Court between the governors and between the Senate and governors that says, look, we need proper advisory other than the 2014 one, because now we don't anticipate every time we have issues about revenue allocation that we run back to court, because the Constitution doesn't actually offer for that. The Constitution looks at one body, the CRA, which has a good representation. Then why can't we let it do its job? So when you look at it like this, are we going to have a different picture once the Supreme Court comes up with a ruling on exactly how it is that we're supposed to proceed?
I think we've had a challenge with advisory rulings before, and some people have actually said that an advisory opinion from the Supreme Court is actually not legally binding. Yes. Some people treat that as so. So the Senate might have been, of course, looked at the history and said, fine, let's go with what is working. And remember, we're running out of time. The process that we're doing now is something that we should have probably done in March or April, or maybe around May, so that by the time we are completing the budget making process, we already know how much is going to the counties.
Yes.
So we've done it in the reverse. And the governors are now boxed to a corner whereby they need money to be moved to the counties, but the bill has not been approved by both houses. So we just hope that this impasse can be sorted out, and probably by the time the Supreme Court is coming out with probably another advisory opinion, it can guide us well on how we go forward. But then this discussion now takes us back to our Constitution, the Constitution that we approved in 2010. Do we need to go back and relook at some of these issues? Do we need to have these issues entrenched in the Constitution in such a way that we don't have three government bodies having three ideas or opinions about one issue that probably should be sorted out and come out clearly in the Constitution?
All right. Yes. The conversation continues. Turns out it is 16, not the 335 that your governor was telling you deserve. Anyway, another issue this morning is that the man, Ukur, officially stepped into the office since CS Potich was told to hand over the keys, and PS Thuge was also told to hand over the keys. Now the two gentlemen, as the new faces in that office, officially stepped into that office. Let's take a look, therefore, at what Ukur had to say yesterday on what his main agenda is before we delve into that this morning. Richie, take us to Ukur. These are not my words. These are not my words. People say they expected a lot of density from the first public appearance and communication to the public of Kenya on exactly what his mandate is. Is it okay listening to that man? Would you say Maybe you should have gone a bit deeper.
I think Ukur looks so worried, and you can see from his body language.
Yes.
There's a bit of lack of comfort in what he's saying.
Yes.
And he probably is wondering, where do I start from? I've just come into Treasury,
yes,
and already the budget has been read out there.
Yes.
There are, of course, too few issues that needs to be sorted out, the revenue allocation bill and the finance bill. Then we proceed. So what is going to be my role? In any case, I'm here as an acting CS Treasury. So yes, I cannot be able to be seen to impose myself in a ministry where I'm only acting. And I'm acting only up to God knows when, yes, probably even next week. And someone else will be brought in. So that is the issue that you can be able to sit with him. But we have to give it to him. Ukur is a seasoned civil servant. Mm-hmm. He's been there for a while.
Yes.
He knows how it is done. He's been a governor for Marsabit for 5 years. He knows how the government operates.
Of note, though, is this. Yes. Shouldn't have we expected him to come in and tell about the specifics of exactly what we wanted him here? Because every Kenyan citizen right now, the only thing that sticks in the minds is that we have a huge budget deficit. We have a huge domestic debt. Should have he come and say, look, my agenda right now is that I'm going to manage as much as I can our budget deficit to make sure that we actually meet it and also try sort of mitigate issues that are leading us to have a very high domestic debt.
No, I think he's been there for a few days.
It's been there, but it comes from, he is a Kenyan citizen, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Is it not in the public domain that everybody is worried about our domestic debt?
No, I think some of those issues are policy issues.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And they're issues that he may not want to come out strongly about.
In the first briefing, isn't it?
In the first briefing,
yes,
before he can be able to sit down and fully understand from the economists in Treasury, yes, on what is the plan going forward. Because remember, Treasury is not just run by the CS. It has so many other technocrats, yes, who of course are involved in these issues. And for him probably wants to take more time to be able to fully understand where we are as a country and what we can be able to do. And let's not expect so much magic from an acting CS Treasury. I mean, he's not going to sort our debt situation in the short run.
Yes,
it's not like there's some money that was hidden somewhere.
Yes.
5 trillion that he's going to pick and pay the Chinese loan.
Yes.
He has to instill confidence, of course, within Treasury, because that is his role, and now bring that confidence out to us, to the markets, so that people can say that, right, this guy is the right person to lead us going forward,
yes,
even if it's for a short period, and that we can be able to experience some form of things being done differently. Because our cry has been that CS Treasury Rotich has been there for so long, the former CS. He has been there for so long. And we wanted new ideas to be injected to the ministry so that we can see whether things can actually be done differently.
Yes. So I'm looking at this issue like this. What is going, yes, let's just assume that eventually, as expected, we're going to see him actually getting officially appointed to assume that role. That's exactly what everybody expects, isn't it? But his biggest challenge would be to look at where the economy is at right now and look at the promise that we had from the former CS. Because whether he likes it or not, he's not going to table another budget and say, look, no, we had this much budget. Now, since I've assumed office,
we're reducing it.
We're going to reduce it. No, we don't expect that.
Yeah.
But is it not just managing it therefore to the end? And then he would have come and said, look, for the next 3 years, I am going to make sure that I put in policies that are going to make sure that our proceeds from the former guy, that is CS Rotich, hit the 2.1 trillion mark that he is looking forward to. Shouldn't that be what he would have said, as opposed to, and this is quote unquote, presidential legacy projects? Do we put a red line on that and say presidential legacy projects as a red line, as opposed to proceeds that we expect to get from the 2019-2020, which are in the 2.1 trillion mark?
No, I think as an appointee of the president,
yes,
he had to come out and talk about the legacy projects. But I think it's a totally wrong approach from him, and nothing stops CS Ukur from going radical enough and presenting a supplementary bill in Parliament.
Yes,
I mean, Rotich did it last year.
He did it last year.
We had the budget reading in sometimes in June, and a supplementary budget in September.
Yes.
So nothing stops him from actually looking at how the budget is and rearranging everything and presenting a supplementary bill
yes,
in Parliament so that we can be able to see how we move forward. That he can do.
Yes.
But again, this financial year and after the second election, the president has focused so much on his legacy projects, the top 4 agenda. And he has been trying to drill every single person in government that this is where we are headed to.
Yes.
And I think that is why Ukur had to come out strongly and talk about it, because he knows what is in the mind of the president.
Yes.
That do everything else, but please give priority
yes.
to my legacy projects.
Now, everybody knows that in 2022, we have maturing loans that are going to be in the region of 1.2 trillion.
Yes.
Let's just assume that is going to be there, isn't it?
Yes.
We've seen Rotich. The only way he's been able to manage these things is go for another Eurobond.
Eurobond, yes.
Now, we do know that he just took a 12-year tranche that's supposed to, in the region of billions. Now, this one, 1.2 trillion. How is this one going to really address this one? Because it's right there in his tenure. Let's just assume that he's still going to be in position when that one matures in 2022. Are we supposed to see him go the Rotich way, where we're going for another Eurobond, or in the short term, what he's supposed to do to see that we actually have the capacity to see the 1.2 trillion maturing loans?
Unless we can be able to find sources of financing
yes.
to start quickly repaying those loans, he will do exactly what the other CS has been doing. That wait for the maturity of the loan, take another loan, to repay the loan,
push it further,
so that we can push that to another 12 years. And
yes.
it's something that we even do in our lives. That you have a mobile loan, probably Tala or whichever loan, that when it comes due, you actually get money to repay the loan, then you again take another loan, so that it leaves you more of the same position that you want. But what we want to see from him is a radical approach
yes.
on how we want to move this country forward.
Yes.
If it's increasing the revenues from the current 1.5 trillion or so to 2.5 or 3 by 2022, that will enable us, will have seen us expand our revenue base to a level that we can actually be able to afford repaying some of those loans.
Okay.
But then he has again a lot of pressure from projects that have to be invested in. That's another thing that he has to look at. So he's not going to keep money to wait for those loans to mature and repay them. But what I pray is that he doesn't use the same approach that Rotich did. The country suffered in the last financial year because so much money was being held so that we can have enough to repay some of those maturing loans.
Yes.
And that really hurt the economy because some projects had to stall. And less money was going to the counties because we had loans that were maturing and we had to repay them. And money had to be looked for from other sources to be able to repay those loans. So we don't want to see him taking that kind of approach because that will hurt the economy.
Yes. Right. That makes the back end of the conversation of this man, Ukur Yatani. We're waiting for his next briefing, and he's promised that it's going to be in depth. So we're just waiting to see exactly what's going to tell us next. Then after that, we're going to come back and table another conversation on what this man plans to do as we wait for CS Rotich's case to continue. Guess what? We're moving over to the next conversation this morning. Now we're talking about a case that has been going on in the country for quite some time now. And I'm going to ask whether it's okay for us to approach it in a different way. Now, the strike that commenced last week Monday has now taken the matter up to Parliament. Now, Makueni Senator Mutula Kilonzo has asked members of Parliament to launch a probe into grievances raised by local digital cab drivers against hailing firms as their industrial action entered its second week to protest reduced earnings. Now, Mr. Kilonzo has written to the Senate Committee on Labour and Social Welfare in a letter dated June 19th, asking Parliament to interrogate the landscape. He asked the committee to explain in detail how Kenyan benefits from the presence of Uber, Bolt, Xtaxify and other hailing apps, and how the state has shielded the drivers from exploitation. Good, they've been on strike, but what has been notable is that even when they are on strike, some sections of the drivers have been on operation, which goes a long way to tell you that even as we strike, we have to keep on, because we depend on this for our daily lives. But for me, when I look at it, because now there are conversations that this is also headed to CS Interior, so that now the radical approach we have seen him take on betting companies in this country will be transferred to taxi companies in this country. And they've gone a long way now. County governments have done their part. They have registered taxi companies as individual companies. Okay? But now it seems that NTSA and the relevant bodies that were actually together in the MOU that was signed a year ago, they have not done their part. It is now taken Parliament now to look into these issues. Drivers are saying, look, it's a good cry. And when you look at it, you can actually start to see that they have a point where they're coming from. Why is it taking this long for government to react?
Question should be,
yes,
why should the government react? What are these taxi drivers, who are they striking against? I mean, we're in a liberal economy where you have the choice of buying bread from shop A or shop B.
Yes.
We have online taxi platforms in the country. There are so many that have come in and have given thousands of drivers an opportunity, actual employment opportunities, and they're making some money out of it. But being a country that we are, it has gotten to a point whereby some drivers feel that, you know, these guys are making much more than we are. It should be the reverse. Let me just explain.
Yes.
So, the business having boomed in Kenya, I could have expected these taxi drivers to come together, form a union or an organization of their own,
yes,
then approach the government and say, look, we feel now we are ready to have our own taxi platform.
Yes.
Can we proceed and register our own? Then we can move away from Uber, Taxify, Bolt, and the rest.
Yes.
That would be a better approach.
Yes.
Then going ahead, someone was brought in a very good idea, a very good innovative idea, and we want to strike against that. And we want even to proceed and take this issue to the CS Interior to now look like we are policing the online platforms.
Yes.
That should not be the approach. We will want these young people, because they are some of us have invested in these taxis, to be able to be innovative enough,
yes,
and come together, either form a union, which I think they have,
yes,
form their own platform, their own company, and move forward. Then they can be able to apply those rates.
When you look at it, people say that's another way to look at it.
Yes.
But now you have companies that are operating within the Kenyan environment that are not native Kenyan companies. We do know that the question actually goes back to Uber. Now, Uber is an international company. They have the right to sit in an office somewhere and say, our rates are like this. Is it okay for them to say, look, even before you start addressing issues into payments, for you to look into the exact conditions of the operation environment, where you say the same condition in New York won't be the same as in Kenya?
So those conditions will be roads, right?
Yes.
And Uber has nothing to do with the bad roads that we have. It goes back to the government.
Which pretty much comes back to say, look, if this model doesn't work here, yes, can we bring another one that therefore sort of makes it level?
Can we be able to localize our problems,
yes,
and come up with solutions?
Yes.
That is the issue. That if we feel Uber are not giving us a run for our money, they are giving us a raw deal, can we be able to come up with our own unique product, like we did with M-Pesa,
yes,
that works for this nation and works for these young guys who are doing this business?
Yes.
Yes. Without having to look at what Uber is doing, because Uber is operating in the country legally.
Yes.
Otherwise, they could have been kicked out. And we have been crying every day for foreign direct investment in this country. And every day we are pushing the government to create conducive environment for foreigners to come and invest. And this has been one form of investment that Uber saw an opportunity, Bolt saw an opportunity, and they took it before someone else could. So let's take a more radical approach in trying to get a local solution, either through Uber themselves or through us. Because I know Safaricom has a similar platform. It has never taken up in terms of numbers. It's like we're saying now we don't like food that is at KFC because KFC is local. We want to strike against them instead of encouraging local businessmen to come up with a similar product which we can be able then to consume.
The point is this, and I really want to see whether you can help me also have the eyes of this taxi driver. The point is this. We have a point in this. You as the government need to listen to our concerns. And as it seems now, all the unions, that's the Digital Taxi Operators Association, seems to think that these concerns are legitimate. Yes. Since we are already in it, and this is an established company, therefore it should conform with whatever environment is down here in where they operate. Do you think that that's a cry enough for the government to come in and intervene?
But okay, what kind of intervention do we expect from the government? Do we expect the government to bring in price controls? Because the cry for the taxis is about how much they're getting in terms of percentage. Do we want the government to come in and actually put price controls in the taxi business? I don't think the government is willing to do that. Because this is not a sector of the economy that has developed so much that the government will want to be so keen on trying to put their hand in. The government will want to actually look on how they can be able to get taxes from these people. And that is the focus of the government. So it's up to these unions to continue engaging directly with the online taxi platforms, the owners of those businesses, to see how they can be able to come up with a more amicable solution without having to directly involve the government. Because what we are doing is, because we've seen some bit of success in how the CS Interiors pushed the betting companies, we now want to militarize everything. That when we feel someone is not handling as well here, the government can come in and handle the issue. No. It is a liberal economy. We are encouraging people to come and invest. If there are issues, they have to be sorted within the entities that, of course, are involved, without having to bring in the government, unless then we want the government to do control. And let me tell you, if price controls were done by the government, it won't take long before more innovative ideas come in, and that will be washed aside. So let's leave it operate the way it is. I mean, I'm happy that I can take a taxi from town to Westlands and 180 shillings, which is the truth. Because we know a 1300cc or a 1000cc car consumes around 1 liter for around 20 or 23 kilometers. So it makes economic sense. The challenge has been repairs of these vehicles because of the condition of the road, the condition that we have with traffic jams, and that has nothing to do with Uber or Bolt. That has everything to do with our country and how we operate. So the cry should be on the government to try and improve our infrastructure. So then we can be able to make more profit.
All right. This morning, we're looking at another story. Now, the Central Bank of Kenya has held its benchmark interest rate at 9%, meaning it has remained unchanged for the 7th consecutive time. Richie, take us to the Central Bank of Kenya Governor Dr. Patrick Njoroge so that we can lay basis to a conversation this morning. All right, that's exactly the basis of the conversation this morning. Now, CBK governor says that our inflation is well anchored within the economy, and they're coming from June at 5.7%. And they say this is a very good point for us, therefore, to base our economic growth at around 5%, negative 2 plus or minus. Good. Therefore, the conversation this morning is really on the lending rate that the Monetary Policy Committee has put at 9%. Now, I just want us to look exactly how it has come from and exactly when it was the highest and lowest in the country. If you go back to 2016, actually that's when we had it the highest at 11.5%. But now, what we've seen from 2018, when we had it at 10, it has kept on coming down all the way to 9, where we have it now. And for those who know that this year, it has been kept at percent for the 7th consecutive time. So when you look at where the central bank has kept the lending rates in the country, what message are they trying to pass? Are they trying to caution the economy from expensive loans? And is it good to base this on inflation rate, which they say is well anchored within the economic projections?
No, it's a good thing that we've not seen, of course, an increase, because I know the moment the CBR rate goes up, then we know that, of course, because the way we calculate our interest rates currently is the CBR rate plus, of course, 4%.
Yes.
So having kept that at the same rate as it was, that then means that our loans, of course, will be, the SMEs and those, of course, who are borrowing will be able to access loans at the same percentage. But then again, it takes you back to another discussion that we've had about the rates. And it's something that keeps on coming in and out every day. Is really our comfort on controlled interest rates, or we'll want the market to open up like it was before so that we have access to credit?
Yes.
Like we had before. Because even with the low interest rates that we have and we've been witnessing, and which of course the central bank governor is proud of today, access to credit is still a bit limited.
Yes.
And you will see that probably there was a bit of increase, but still again, people are still complaining. So it is a good thing that we've kept the rate as it was. And we can also feel proud that the economy is growing. But I think we've gotten to a point that we need to focus on economic development more than economic growth.
Yes.
Because economic growth is not working for us in terms of numbers. We have the numbers, but people cannot be able to relate to those numbers. Because me and you may understand the numbers, but Wanjiku cannot be able to understand those numbers. Because for them, they want to look at the very basics. Are we still able to access food at low prices? Are we able to access education at very basic rates?
Yes.
And so many other issues. That is what Wanjiku is doing. So unless we can be able to disseminate these figures to a level where we can tell Wanjiku that, no, there's comfort, that things are going well, the figures do not still work.
The conversation around, and this, I'm getting told that we have run out of our time. Good. Richie, just one more question, please. Thank you. Now, the conversation around the interest rates, even the former, I don't know whether it's okay for me to call him the former CS now, Rotich, he said, look, let's not base our conversation on interest rates. Because now, how you get interest rates is that they become something that is not there if the economy is performing well. And that's where Dr. Patrick Njoroge is coming from. He's saying, look, our inflation is still at 5.7%, which for me, from where I stand, means that our interest rates are still okay. We can just leave them there. So you cannot even talk about opening it back to like 2016 when it was 11.5% if I feel right now that my inflation is within 5.7%, which is still within line, and the economic growth I'm projecting at 5%, which is way above what the IMF projects the world economic growth to grow by. Is it okay for us not to have a conversation about interest rates, therefore, and talk about economic development, just like you're saying?
No, it is. It has gotten to a point where people are so tired with the figures, the macroeconomic issues that are being given out,
yes,
and they want to focus on the very basic issues. And we'll want our professionals, especially the central bank governor and the CS treasurer and the rest, to actually come out and speak to Mwananchi, because they work for Mwananchi. They don't work for us economists, because we understand these figures better. They need to come out and talk to Mwananchi, because Mwananchi wants to focus on very basic issues and how they affect them.
Yes.
So when you talk about inflation, they want to see the price of commodities. So when he says that the increase in prices of essential commodities is not significant,
yes,
I'm very sure so many people will not agree with that, because that is what affects our day-to-day lives. So let's move away from this jargon, which is of course economic jargon,
yes,
and try and talk to Mwananchi directly by telling them what they want to hear. How is the link between inflation, economic growth, and of course interest rates helping them in terms of their access,
yes,
to credit, the prices of commodities,
yes,
and how is economic growth, how can we be able to translate our growth in the economy to what is very tangible to them in terms of infrastructure and all those things.
Yes.
Because even with GDP growth, and we've not achieved the things that we want to achieve as a country, we've not still moved. We will still be more of like mark timing.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. This morning, what has happened in July? We do know that the prices of maize have really gone high. This morning, we are talking about 4,800 in Kitale. We're talking about 4,100 in Nairobi. We're also talking about an increase in fuel prices, especially for those who go for petrol. It's also increased. So the question is, are we going to have a different one come July? I'm talking about inflation rate, and this is going to affect, therefore, the lending rates that the Central Bank of Kenya is pushing to the economy. Good. That means we've come to the end of the conversation this morning on issues that you need to know. Guess what? We take a short break. Once we come back, Metropole sector trends. What are we looking at today? Next.